Today's video is a beginner's guide to shooting in manual mode with your camera. So if you're new to photography, or hey, you've been shooting in auto mode for a while and want to take your photography to a next level, friend, this video is going to be for you. Now, shooting in manual mode gives you complete control of your camera, allowing you to take full creative control of your photos as well. Now, to help you make that transition from auto over to manual, we're going to cover the basics of shooting in manual mode, including exposure triangle, aperture, shutter speed, and also ISO. Now, after each of these, there's going to be a couple experiments that you can get out there and try for yourself today. Now, what does this all mean to you? Well, by the end of this video, you're going to have a solid understanding how to shoot in manual mode, and this is going to allow you to get out there and take your best shot. That said, friend, let's dive into it. Now, before we dive into the specifics of aperture, shutter speed, and ISO, let's talk a little bit about the exposure triangle. Now, the exposure triangle is a graphical representation of the relationship between the three elements and how they affect the exposure of your photo. Now, as you can see in this graphic, aperture controls the amount of light that enters in the camera. Shutter speed controls the duration of the exposure, and ISO, well, that controls the sensitivity of the camera sensor. Now, to get a properly exposed photo, you need to balance all three of these elements. So it's important to note that changing one of these elements will affect the others. So it's necessary to keep that in mind when making such adjustments. Now, before we really get this party off to go here, we're going to be diving into some pretty exciting lessons. This is what I was talking about early on. Each and every one of these has been really tailored for you. Now, right after we break after each element of the exposure triangle, and again, that's aperture, shutter speed, and ISO, you're going to get the chance to tackle a few interactive, well, technically there's two interactive experiments with each one. Now, my tip for you here is, rather than running off there and playing around with these right off the get-go, watch the entire video from start to finish first, then absorb all the information, then circle back around and hit the pause button after each lesson so you can dive into the experiment yourself. Follow along and you're going to see a real boost in your photography skills. It's not a matter of if, might, or maybe. You get out there, practice. That is the key with this. Get out there and practice it, and you will see your photography really accelerate forward. Kicking things off is aperture, which is the opening of the lens that allows the light to enter into the camera. Now, this is measured in f-stops, now with a lower number indicating a larger opening and a higher number indicating a smaller opening. Now, aperture affects the depth of field in your photo as well. Now, a wide aperture, again, this is a low f-stop number, will create a shallow depth of field, with only the subject in focus and the background blurred. On the other side of the fence, you have a narrow aperture. Again, this could be a high f-stop number. Will create a deep depth of field, with everything in focus from the foreground all the way to the background. Now, when shooting in manual mode, you need to adjust your aperture based upon the lighting and the effect that you want to achieve. Now, a wider aperture is going to be ideal for low light situations, like when you want to go outside and shoot the moon or the stars or stuff like that. Astrophotography. A narrow aperture is going to be really important for landscape photography or pretty much any other time when you want everything in focus. Now, jumping over to shutter speed. Shutter speed is the amount of time that the shutter remains open. It is measured in seconds or fractions of a second. Now, shutter speed is important for capturing motion in your photos. Now, a fast shutter speed, for example, 1/500th of a second or faster, is ideal for freezing motion, with a slower shutter speed, like 1/30th of a second, is good for capturing motion, blur, or creating a sense of movement in your photos. Like clouds, rivers, or if you want to try something fun with people, slow your shutter speed down enough and you can make people disappear. Yeah, disappear. Think about that the next time you are out in a crowded tourist area. Now, when shooting in manual mode, you need to adjust your shutter speed depending upon the motion in your scene and the effect that you want. Now, crank up the shutter speed to freeze motion, slow it down to get that dreamy motion blur. Last but not least is ISO, which controls the sensitivity of the camera's sensor to light. Now, a higher ISO number indicates a more sensitive sensor, while a lower ISO number indicates a less sensitive sensor. And while the higher ISO can help you get properly exposed photos in low light situations, it can also introduce noise, or kind of that's that grainy stuff that you'll see in a photo, into the photo itself, which I think I just said that. We're going to go with it. When shooting in manual mode, you also need to balance your ISO with the aperture and the shutter speed to get the properly exposed photo without introducing too much noise. Again, this is a delicate balance to achieve, and while it might be a little overwhelming at first, with lots of practice, you're going to find the rhythm needed to balance each element of the exposure triangle. All right, friends, now that we've covered the basics of shooting in manual, it's time to practice. And many would agree, this is the most important part out of all of this here. Go back, watch this video, pause after each lesson, and go try each of the lessons that we put there. Now, once you've gotten done with the lessons outlined in this video, take out your camera, go outside, and start experimenting with different settings. Practice in different lighting situations in different subjects. And friends, don't be afraid to make mistakes. That is really how you learn. Get out there and practice. It is simple as that. And as you practice, you're going to start to develop a better understanding of how exposure triangle works and how to get the results that you really want. All right, friends, and that brings us to the end of the video. I hope you found some value with this beginner's guide to shooting in manual mode. Now, if you have any questions, or better yet, if you run into any problems, drop a comment down below and I'll be happy to help you out. Now, if there's a particular subject that you want us to cover in the future video, let me know in the comments as well. And also, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel for more photography tutorials and tips just like the one that you just watched. As always, thank you so much for tuning in and spending a few minutes with me here today. I will see you in the next video.